Hi friends, welcome back to Rafting Magazine's Material Focus series, where we take a look at a bunch of different materials that are used in the outdoor industry. So on this episode, we are going to be talking about nylon and what nylon is and how it works. So let's get into it. So nylon is a petroleum-derived thermoplastic that was developed by DuPont in 1939. And this was really developed for the US military and applications in World War II. So what is it? Now, there's a lot of materials that are made out of nylon. I have a bunch of different samples here that I'm going to show you, but in the outdoor industry, we have everything from tents. This is a Mountain Hardwear tent that I have had for a very long time. Super great. I have a pair of paddle pants from Immersion Research, their Devil's Club series that is also made of nylon. I have an NRS paddle jacket that is Kaylee's, also made out of nylon. And I have a Kokatat dry suit that's also made out of nylon. And I talk a lot about PTFE versus nylon and the inner lining versus the outer shell. Now, nylon is a face fabric that's used in all of these things. So it's not the thing that actually keeps you dry. In fact, nylon tends to keep you more wet. And I'll go into that in a minute. But just remember that the suits that we have are largely nylon. There's a few that are made out of polyester, and you just got to look at different brands for what they have. But all of these products that I have, they're all nylon. And if you see something like Gore-Tex, and I hear this all the time, that a Kokatat suit is Gore-Tex, it's actually not Gore-Tex. This is nylon with Gore-Tex sandwiched in between it. And if you want to learn more about PTFE, you can go watch our first episode of this. But let's talk about what it is. So nylon is a really awesome fabric, but it's also derived out of petroleum. So there's some environmental concerns that we'll go into in a little bit. But nylon, by and large, has excellent tear resistance. These Devil's Club pants that I have beat them around. I've literally taken them around the world. I'm just starting to get some scuffs on the sides and the bottom of it. It's starting to just get a little torn up, and I mean, I'm impressed with nylon gear. It tends to stay together for a very long time. So tear resistance is excellent. The tensile strength is really good on nylon. Another element of nylon is it has low breathability. So when you're looking at a suit that is, or a jacket, even I have a nylon outer shell jacket. It's like a mountain biking jacket, and the problem with it is that it doesn't breathe very well. So when you're looking at a suit, and we'll get into this in a little bit, when you're looking at a dry suit or something like that, it's not going to breathe very well, especially if it's made out of nylon. So that's something to consider with nylon. It has moderate moisture wicking properties. It's not really good at pulling moisture away from your body. And that's part of the issue with nylon is that it just doesn't, if you have a nylon jacket on, it's not going to pull that away and move the moisture away from your body. It is cheap to produce. So you will find a lot of nylon products out there they don't cost a lot. And it's just because, petroleum's everywhere. It's easy to get, and it's easy to manufacture. So there are some dyes that are used in nylon, and they're called vat dyes, and they actually cause extensive degradation to nylon, and they're responsible for rapid fading through the fabric oxidizing in UV light. So when your nylon suit that you're wearing on the outside, for instance, you have a NRS dry top and or paddle jacket, and I don't know if this is made with the vat dyes. I suspect it's not. A lot of brands like NRS, Kokatat, Immersion Research, they don't use vat dyes, but a lot of cheaper jackets that you'll find use these vat dyes, and they do cause a lot of degradation to the fibers when they're exposed to the sun, and they're usually outer layers. So a lot of the stuff I'll be talking about, I will drop some links down below if you want to learn more, but I did sort through a lot of research to find out all this information for you. So one of the other interesting things about nylon and its molecular degradation is the fact that polymers like nylon are inherently susceptible to molecular degradation through immersion in water. So if you get this wet and it stays wet, it will begin to degrade the polymer itself. So that's something that's really interesting about it. We use it in a lot of paddling gear, but oddly enough, getting it wet makes it get destroyed. So something to think about as well. Now, I did find an article that was talking about degradation of nylon and how it degrades in the atmosphere. So they spent about 2 years studying this stuff in an atmospheric environment with a balloon. And they categorize it as a C3 environmental category, and C3 refers to the level of corrosiveness of the atmosphere. So essentially, they exposed it to something similar to an urban or industrial atmosphere with moderate sulfur dioxide pollution, or also a coastal area with low salinity. So that's kind of what we're looking at when they talk about the C3 corrosive environment. So after 2 years, it held up for 2 years, but after 2 years, it'll gradually start to degrade. And in the long term, it won't be necessarily a reliable material in terms of tensile strength. So the whole reason we buy nylon is because of the tear resistance, because it has high tensile strength. But given enough time, it's going to break down and it's going to degrade. So something to think about with that. So let's talk about absorption and drying speed. So its water absorption is way less than something like wool or cotton. The shirt I'm wearing is actually made out of wool. So this shirt's going to absorb a lot of water. Nylon is actually hydrophilic, which means it absorbs water readily. And nylon can absorb 1.5 to 2.5% of its weight in water initially. So whatever initial exposure it has to water, that's going to be about how much it has, maybe over a day or so. And then over the long term, this stuff will actually absorb a lot of water. So if you are, say, on a Grand Canyon trip and you're spending 20, 30 days in the Grand Canyon, this is going to absorb a lot of water. So your Kokatat suits, your immersion research Devil's Club suits, they're going to absorb up to 10.8% of its weight in water. And that water is just going to stay in it. If you don't get it dry, it's just not going to dry out for you. So again, on a Grand Canyon trip, this is definitely going to be a concern for you over the long haul. And it's something to think about with degradation of it. So if you're, and again, this is more of a winter kind of boating issue, but like I previously said, water actually causes it to break down. And there are a lot of elements in water that causes it to break down. So these suits are going to have some issues over the long term if you don't make sure they are dried out after every use. So let's talk about nylon's drying speed. And its drying speed is a function of the ambient humidity. So in high humidity environments, it's going to dry significantly more slowly. And its inability to repel water causes the fabric to swell and ultimately weakens the molecular structure. It actually causes the molecules to expand and contract. So why is that bad? Well, when you look at the PTFE that's on the inside of it, PTFE can degrade in water, and especially in the presence of heavy elements. So if you have a nylon suit and you keep it wet and it stays wet, it's going to degrade not only the nylon, but the PTFE as well. So another thing to think about. I haven't found any studies about heat retention. However, this is rarely used as an insulating material. You're not going to find this as something that's like used in synthetic fibers and sleeping bags or puffy vests or things like that. So let's get to the environmental concerns about this. Now, discarded nylon fabric can take 30 to 40 years to decompose. It's a difficult material to recycle, so most manufacturers would rather use new nylon than deal with the recycling process. To their credit, Patagonia is actually one of the companies that has invested in recycling technology for both nylon and polyester. So they're kind of leading the outdoor industry with the recycling process, but you really have to have a facility set up to deal with this and work through it. So All that being said, nylon is a thermoplastic, so it does lend itself well to recycling if the technology is in place. So with a thermoplastic, you can heat them up, they remelt, and you can put them in new products, and they're basically as good as new as soon as they melt. So I found some U.S. Department of Defense studies that show a prediction for the average lifetime of a nylon product. And it's about approximately 20 years. So give or take plus or minus 10 years before the product degrades. So it really depends on the conditions you're in. As boaters, we're going to be on the lower side of that. We're going to be more in the 10-year to 15-year range. We're probably not going to get the 20 out of it because of the environment that we use it in. It's a really harsh environment that we use it in for nylon itself. So when you think of your fabric and you think of what you're using, I know a lot of folks who have Kokatat dry suits from the 1990s. They're kind of this blue and yellow kind of dry suits, and I know a lot of people still use them. I know a lot of people use dry suits from the early 2000s. If you have one of those suits, odds are they're not going to make it that long unless you use it very infrequently, and it's not a very commonly used suit for you. And you take care of it really well. You keep it out of UV light, you dry it really well, store it in a dry environment, maybe use desiccant to keep it from getting moisture in it. That's going to prolong the life of your product, but ultimately, you're not going to get that much life out of. You're not going to get 20 years of life out of a suit. I mean, it's just not going to happen in a rafting environment. So, let's talk about garments and use. Where we could typically find this stuff. So, nylon is used in most outdoor gear, like almost all of it. It's usually a face fabric, paddle jackets, and dry gear again. So it has excellent tear resistance, which makes it great for super high wear areas. Even on my polyester immersion research suit, kind of in the knees, the butt, all of those like high wear areas, they reinforce it with nylon fabric. So that's pretty cool because it keeps it from ripping in those areas. And a lot of booties on dry suits, even if they are polyester, are going to be made out of nylon. If you're using nylon paddling gear, it has a propensity to hold water and make you feel colder. So continuous splashes, when they hit you, it's going to aid in convective heat loss. So as water's splashing you, that water's going to hit you, it's going to roll off, it's going to beat off, and you're going to be in a point where you're starting to get colder and colder and colder. Kaylee has switched from using nylon suits to polyester suits and has found that it keeps her warmer because it's not absorbing water and absorbing cold water, and that cold water is not staying with her. It's beating off and then rolling off of her suit. Now, eventually all stuff does wet out, but nylon is going to wet out faster than anything else. It's not going to dry on long multi-day trips in wet weather. So another thing to think about if you do a lot of multi-day trips. And one of the leading causes of dry suit failure is the suit being wet for a long time. Like I mentioned, the PTFE inside actually breaks down. And we see this a lot on the Grand Canyon because inside this suit here, we have multiple layers of nylon. So we have a layer of nylon, a layer of PTFE, a layer of nylon. This NRS paddle jacket, it is a layer of nylon with a layer of PTFE on the inside here. So what that means is that the nylon is going to absorb water and one side of it is going to stay wetter for longer. So if you have two layers sandwiched, sandwiching the PTFE, and your suit's going to stay wet for a long time, a lot of people talk about early, late season trips on the Grand Canyon. They just chew up dry suits. Well, that's the reason for it. I mean, you got a lot of sediment in the water. You have a lot of minerals. You have a lot of other things that are going to degrade the PTFE. So when that happens, you are just going to have a suit that will eat up nylon and PTFE. You're going to get weird bubbles in it as the PTFE delaminates. So if you have a nylon suit, especially a 3-layer nylon PTFE nylon suit like this one, you might see weird bubbles starting to form. I don't see any in this suit, but you're going to see weird bubbles kind of form in it, and that is the PTFE delaminating from the nylon on the inside of the suit. And there is a little bit of wear on this suit from UV damage, and you can really see the difference in how it looks. It's not much at this point, but eventually it'll get worse, and your suit's just going to degrade. The UV damage, the water damage, it'll keep going. So from a longevity standpoint, like I said, you're going to get a good amount of longevity out of it. Are you going to get 20 years? Probably not. If you use it a lot like I do, you're definitely going to get less than that. So that's how nylon works. That's what nylon is. Hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, please drop those below. Be happy to answer them. And we'll see you next time.